Today I'll be discussing the game Outreach from SPI in 1976, the Outreach, the Conquest of the Galaxy. I appreciate subscriptions. Please subscribe and click on notifications. So this is an excellent game. It's one of the earlier games, 1976. The cover art is very nice. It comes in what's called a flat tray. It's like almost 40 years old, so it shows a bit of wear, and you have to kind of maybe tape edges a little bit, but the idea is that it comes in this, and it contains a big tray, as you described. The cover is very nice. It's one of the nicer covers, I think. Very nice kind of sci-fi look to it. So it's a bit worn. On the inside cover, it's got a little bit of theme. Outreach is a grand strategic simulation of intragalactic conflict. The scale of the game is generally huge. The 23 by 35 map depicts an area some 28,000 light years by 50,000 light years, including about 1/3 of the galaxy. Outreach is concerned with a period of vast, explosive expansion by an ambitious, dynamic civilization. Each X on the maps is color-coded to indicate the relative star density. The player is charged with the task of guiding the destiny of a civilization. The components, so the rules, it's 16 pages, and there are these 4 sets of player tables, and we'll talk about them, but it's scatter effects, how likely you are to have problems when you're moving around. Interaction is how you interact with others, and it's an interesting approach. You do it secretly, and then you compare to see the effects of combat or not. There are autonomous forces which come into play, non-player forces, and this is what if they're hostile or allies or not. There's fleets of starships, and then there's stargates, which are basic locations of civilization where they come from. When you're fighting, you can reduce other people's stargates. A battle combat table here. You explore the galaxy, the likelihood you are of finding resources and systems. So each hex is very large. It's like 1,200 light years. So even if you're in the same hex, you may not see each other. So this is the likelihood of you seeing each other if you're in the same hex. Basically, this is the main combat results table, and then this is here for converting percentages from this. But we'll talk about that. It compares the attacker. It's the defensive strength. Fate table. So part of this is fate. There's a chance of different, like seeing civilizations or having problems in your civilization that reduce your forces, getting advanced technology, etc. is all captured on this. So there's 4 of these. And this game can play solitaire or up to 4 players. And then here's the tray, which is very nice. Like the rest of it, it's 40 years old, so it takes maybe a bit of care, and there's a reinforced backing which you may have to tape a little bit, but it's nice. It's got comes with dice, it's got these covers for the trays. A nice mix of components. As you'll see, the game accomplishes a lot with not a very large. There's a good quantity of components, but there's not a lot of different types of components. So I've shown all the different component types here. So there's 4 different players, and each color obviously indicates a different player. Each player has groupings of starfleets, which one starfleet force can include various mixes of explorers, regular, and also dreadnoughts within that. And I'll show you can track that. So same, and you have numbers to correspond, so you can keep track. That's the 4 players. And then there's also non-player forces, which also have fleets and stargates. And there's 4 different ones that can come up randomly. Their fleets don't have groupings, they're an individual, like a regular or dreadnought. And an SF would indicate, a regular force, for instance. A D on the back would indicate dreadnought. And then these are their stargates, and their stargates have a value that's set on the back. And then there's these beacon stars, which makes it easier to basically move around the board. There's a wisdom chit. If you get 1 or 2 wisdom chits, you have a chance of increasing your civilization level. So these are resource chits. When you discover a system, when you're exploring, these are the amount of resources that they can be developed when you convert them into a Stargate that they can be developed to achieve. And this indicates different areas of the map. This is on a spiral axis. This is on the fringe of a spiral axis, and this is off of a spiral axis, or in the interspace between them. So one item that isn't included but that is useful is a player aid to track the resource points of the Stargates and the composition of the Starfleets. And that's what I've shown here. There's other people have different ways of doing it, but I found this is useful. So the map is very nice. It's very large. It's approximately 25 inches by like 34 inches. In each hex, there's a pattern of stars. It's probably difficult to make out, but it almost gives like a 3D effect. This is the core of the Milky Way. These are the spiral axis arms. This is where we are. So kind of yellowish golden is the spiral axis space. This is the fringe of the spiral axis. And then this is the intra area between spiral axes. And then this is a dust cloud. And this is the nucleus. And this is where the wisdom chits are, at the center of the nucleus. There's a randomization tool here to help you. It's astronomically accurate from what they viewed the Milky Way looking like in 1976. There's several actual stars, Rigel, Deneb, for instance, that are located on the map in the correct locations. Dust clouds where they can't see beyond. The scale is approximately correct. So it's a very, very nice map. It does reference the previous game Star Force, and this is building off of that. So Star Force gives a little more theme, and it talks about the psychic transportation abilities, etc. Where basically the humans are starting to expand in their galaxy. Starfleets, which are represented by these counters, but basically Starfleets contain a mix of individual fleets, so the larger fleet can contain regular explorer and dreadnoughts, and together they're combined to a larger fleet. Shift is the way of moving. It's instantaneous movement of Starfleets from one point in another. Stargates, which are the sources of resources and supports movement. Sequence of play, it's for multiplayer, one player, each player does a game turn. So first of all, you determine the order of players, and then you do shifting, which is which is basically your motion. And then you do reserve shifts, which you're allowed to, after you do your regular turn, you can do one more to kind of keep a little bit, everybody kind of guess what you're doing. Exploration, where you look for resources and systems. Interaction, where you can contact. If there's contact, you interact. There might be conflict, and then there might be forces that are reducing the strength of a Stargate. And there's fate, which gives you various occurrences depending on how many systems you have, has some effect on that, and you can try to influence fate by resources. Then allocation, this is where you develop ships, develop Stargates. So there's a civilization level range where it's relatively safe to transport, and it's the square of your level. So for 1 it'd be 1, for 2 it'd be 4. That affects if you can shift safely to Stargates within that range without having to scatter. But if you do there's a chance of scatter is happening, where it means you are not going where you don't end up where you intended to go, and you might lose a % of your force, for instance, and that's based on die rolls and adjustment factors. So for instance, if you had 2 to your die roll, if your Starfleets are explorers, free civilization level greater than 1. So free civilization greater than 1, you add 2 to your shifting Starfleets if they have explorers. And also if there's a beacon star, if it's a friendly Stargate. So that affects the benefits of having those strengths. If you're going across the dust cloud, you can You can only go one hex across that. You can't shift across the dust cloud boundary. Continual shifting then, if you have several, like for instance, friendly stargates within your civilization level range, you can just jump from them without risk from scatter, and you can kind of jump across the board. Or also if there's beacon stars, you can also use them to jump across the board. If you scatter, if you're jumping into the galactic nucleus, you automatically lose your fleet. Each of the hexes are quite large. So each hex is 1,200 light years across. So even if they're in the same hex as another force, it's not a guarantee that you'll see them. And there's a contact table to determine if contact does occur, where you refer to your contact index and you do a die roll. So the contact index is a number of friendly explorer starfleets in the hex, plus the total of all the friendly starfleets in the hex. So that's how you get your contact index. And then you'd refer to your table to see if a contact happens. If there is contact, then you indicate that on your ship by turning over and seeing there's contact. So then if there is contact, there's interaction. The green might say that they want to be neutral to yellow, and then yellow might say that they want to be hostile to green. And then you compare the two, and then you go down to this matrix. So for instance, green wants to be neutral to yellow, but yellow wants to be hostile to green. I would move down here, and it indicates the effect on index. So for instance, there will be an attack bonus. They will have an attack bonus. And this is a way of managing your kind of intentions with others. It's kind of an interesting aspect of how you can kind of mask your intentions, but then when you see what the other person intent is, then you are affected by that. And then also, if you come across an autonomous force, do a die roll to see here if they're cooperative, neutral, or hostile, and then you'd indicate them here. So conflict may occur if there's been contact. Player simultaneously indicates whether they're going to attack. They indicate their approximate conflict capacity, and then you resolve the conflict on the conflict table. The conflict capacity of a force is the total number of the star fleets in the hex minus the number of explorer fleets plus the number of dreadnoughts. So you get a deduction for the explorer and an addition for the dreadnoughts. And then you compare the ratio of the attacker's conflict capacity to the defender's. Then you adjust your die roll. So for each dreadnought, you add 1 to the die roll. For each dreadnought, starfleet in the defending force, you subtract 1. Based on that, adjustments to the die roll and your relative percentages of attacker to defense conflict capability, you get the ratios of percentage of loss of the attacker and defender, and then you apply those to your starfleet. So reduction, if an opposing fleet is on the Stargate they're opposing, they can reduce the resource ability of the Stargate, and that's only if there isn't a defending Starfleet there. Then for reduction is this table. You compare your force, dreadnoughts, etc. with adjustment factors to your Stargate capability as far as resources, and then you do a die roll, and it shows if there's neutralization that occurs. Once a Stargate is neutralized, it has no benefits anymore. You don't get resource points. You can't use it for shifting. The friendly player can deneutralize them by applying starfleets to develop them. Then in a turn, you do the fate table. Take your total system points, which is your summed Stargate values, and you consult the table, you roll dice. You can adjust the die roll by expending resource points. This gives you various options. On the fate table, some options are A, a species wants to sever ties and then you lose 10% of your Stargates. B, a charismatic leader rises to prominence and you lose 30% of your forces. C, long-standing inability of two species to get along is a conflict, 50% dissolution. D, you get a highly You trace just drug, but unfortunately it's addictive, so you get 70% dissolution. E, gradual trend to of decaying of central authority, 80% dissolution. F, authoritarian regime assumes control, 90% dissolution, decreased civilization 1, so some pretty harsh consequences. And then G through J are autonomous forces of different numbers of stargates and starfleets. K and L are increasing civilization levels, so for K on the fate chart, like K2 for instance indicates you need 2 wisdom chits for that to happen. So you'd have to have 2 wisdom chits and then get the appropriate roll in the fate table to get increasing 2 levels. So that's the fates, and then like I said, you can put resource points so that you can reduce the chances of getting the bad ones, because you basically shift down on the table so you kind of get away from the more negative ones. Then autonomous units, there's 4 different types. In some fates these will appear and you might get 2 stargates and 5 starfleets, or 5 stargates and 12 starfleets, or in between. You place them near where you have a discovery, and they're passive. They just exist there until contacted. When they're contacted, they can become active, and then when they're active, the discovering player is the one that controls them. And for solitaire, there's rules for how they move towards stargates, and also, general rules for how they move towards, like if they're hostile to forces. And then resource allocation mentions you can write down in scratch paper, but there's different ways of doing it out there, but this is one that works. You can keep track of your different fleets as far as compositions, like you have your fleet numbers, and then you put if they're regular, dreadnought, or explorer, keep track of how many. Your different stargates, keep track of what their value is. And then different scenarios go for different turns, and then you can keep track of the total system points. And if there's dissolution, what your system points are reduced to. And then maintenance, if have multiple fleets in a given fleet group, you basically anything above 1, unless an explorer you don't discount, but number of fleets above 1, you take that many maintenance to maintain them, and you deduct that from your available resource points from your system. You may expend points to deneutralize stargates. You deduct that, and then you can expend points to build fleets. And how many fleets you build on a stargate is limited by your technology. So, for instance, level 1, you can only build 1 at a time on a stargate. Regular starfleets cost 3 resource points. Dreadnoughts cost 8. Explorers cost 5. So you would, for whichever ones you're building, you would basically keep the cost here and then check the balance. And then in addition to building the starfleets, you can also, if you have a resource chit and you want to develop that, if you put a fleet that has a fleet group that has 2 fleets in it, you can basically convert those 2 fleets to making that a stargate, and then that stargate has 0. And also, if you have a stargate that's not developed yet, you can put fleets on there and use that number of fleets to raise the value to the maximum. Like, for instance, you could raise it from, the max here is 3 in this hex, which is a spiral axis space. If you had 1 fleet in here, you could raise that 1 point, so it would be from 0 to 1, and then you'd update the stargate value. And then once the stargate is its full value, you just replace it like that. And then beacon stars are these items. These are beacon stars that already exist. The name stars are beacon stars, but undiscovered ones are this one. And if you go to a region past dust clouds where there's no line of sight to existing beacon stars, you discover other ones, and then you roll the dice and add 2 to how many beacon stars you discover, and then by rolling dice you determine where to put those beacon stars in this newly discovered area, so that's also interesting. And then the beacon stars are useful for when you do your shifting, so that they reduce your scatter effects. And then interstellar dust, you can only shift one space across. To have a chance of increasing your civilization, you need to get a wisdom chip. That's what these are, and these are placed at the galactic core, and there's 10 of them, and one is an X, and if you get to one of the X, it indicates, some effect given this scenario. For instance, in the solitaire scenario, it means that the core is exploded. So you have to go down to the galactic core to get the wisdom chits, and then in your fate table, that gives you an option of increasing. You have a chance of increasing your civilization level. The scenario I'm going to do is a solitaire scenario. It's a PSL Outleap. So in SPI's first science fiction game, Star Force, the history of humanity was traced up through first contact with spacefaring non-human telesthetics and subsequent formation of the Pan-Senic League, which include 2 such extraterrestrial races. An area some 40 light years in diameter, contained completely within Hex 1316, the outreach map, comprised the map for that game. Each hex in outreach is some 1200 light years in diameter. Therefore, the scenario picks up a distant and hugely expanded PSL descendant civilization, occupying an area some 10,000 times its original size. So it's from the initial Star Force, it's basically been expanding. And it is still dynamic and growing. So the forces at start set up these 3 stargates at these locations, Sol, and then the other locations. And then it tells you the stargate values. And for instance, on here I show that these are the stargate numbers and these are their values. And then the fleets, there's one Explorer, one regular on 1316, regular on 1216. The initial available resource points are 5. Civilization is level 1. Victory conditions. The player wins if he manages to raise civilization of the PSL to 2 at the end of the game. It's a game like this, 25 turns. If the player gains control of the X Wisdom chip, it signifies the discovery of the fact that the nuclear core has exploded, an explosion is spreading outwards in a gargantuan chain reaction at the speed of light. The game is automatically lost, and the player has about 40 million years to entirely evacuate the galaxy, give or take a few hours. So then the way I've shown that on this sheet is, so the fleet 1 and 2, 1 is 1 regular, 1 Explorer, 2 is 1 regular, and then like I said, here's the Stargate values, and you have initial balance that you'll add to your star points. And then as far as set up the map then, these are the Stargates in the defined locations, Sol, and then the other 2. And then there's 2 fleets, one is on Sol, and the other is on 1216. And then the wisdom chits done are in the galactic core, and they're randomly selected from the 10. So one of those might be the X or it may not be. So let's set up and then we'll play. So in the beginning of turn 17 here, thought I'd show the progress, then I'll go through an example game turn. So I've been tracking, the progress on the sheet here. Again, it's a custom sheet, but you can do any way to track it if you want. Basically, these are the different fleet compositions. For instance, fleet 1 has 2 regular. Fleet 10 has 2 explorers, so they're moving around. These are the different stargates. Some have been fully developed and some haven't. For instance, 31 is not fully. It just has a point of 0 at this point. It needs to be developed. Others have been fully developed. Some are partially developed. Like 38, for instance, is partially developed. And then the fleets, I have this one's going to the galactic core because I want to get a wisdom chit to have a chance of increasing my civilization level. I need to get that wisdom chit and bring it back to a stargate. These are going out and exploring. This one he'll go through this dust cloud here, and then he'll be able to see some beacon stars, which helps movement. This one's going to work towards developing this one, and the star Stargate's going to be developing ship's course. This one discovered this autonomous force, and this force is hostile, so this force will start coming against me here, so that's interesting. And these are the various resource shit, so since these have a value of 0, again, this is the resource max of, spiral axis, fringe, and then inner spiral space, so it's 0 for these, so it doesn't make sense to develop these. So I'll get going into a turn then, and I'll zoom in on this. So the sequence of a turn is if you have multiple players, you determine shift order. I'm just doing a solitaire. You do your shift, you do your exploration, you do your interrelation, which can involve combat, your fate, and then you do your resource. So I'll do movement in order of the different forces I have. Fleet 201 here will move. He's moving out to explore here. Move up there. Since my technology level is 1, there's not a risk of just moving 1 hex, but if I move multiple, there's a chance of scatter. Fleet 2 here. He's going to be moving through here. He'll just move 1 also, and then since he's coming to an area where there was previously blocked sight to a beacon star, he can see new beacon stars now. Okay, so you do this and you roll dice and add 2 to it. So 3, you discovered 3 beacon stars. So as far as their placement, so for solitaire, the player chooses a hex row, rolls the die twice for each hex. For each hex that I roll a 9, I place it there. So these are the 3 beacon stars that are placed, and then they will be useful when you shift to them. There's no chance of scatter if you go to them, since they're like a navigation aid. So then 203 will continue moving out here. 204 will move out here and explore. 205 will stay here to develop. 206 will move here to develop at Stargate. 207 will move back. 208 will move more rapidly to the galactic core. That's referred to the scatter table. And they're going to try to go 3 hexes. So, roll. And they're okay, there's no scatter. If they were to scatter, then they would be moving to 1 or 2, etc. adjacent hexes in a random direction, and they would lose some fleet. So they're able to move 3. 209 will stay there to develop, and then 210 will stay there to turn that into a Stargate. That's movement. And then exploring, nothing. So they need either 1 or 2 depending on how many they have. They didn't find anything. Didn't find anything. Getting unlucky, didn't find anything. Everything 6s, didn't find anything. So there was no discoveries. If there had been a discovery, which would be convenient for demonstration, you would, for instance, if some of these had a score, so for instance, if there's 2 regular, the die roll would be 2. If you have 2 explorers and a regular, you would be 4 plus 1, so 5, and you'd shift to this. And then you roll die roll, you would find an exploration. And if they were, you would randomly draw a resource chit and then put it under there to indicate the capability that they can develop there. So that's exploration. And then interaction, I'm not going to be doing anything there, I'm just trying to get away from these. Then the fate roll. So you look at your system points, and there's currently 20. You total up the values of your Stargate. And then you consult, here's the fate table. Obviously you go that 1, 6. Okay, looks like something's going to happen. H. Here's the fate. H is an appearance of another autonomous force. Place 3 Stargates and 7 star fleets on the game map. If I hadn't done any exploring, then I would ignore that, but I did do exploring, and then I'll see which of these is actually here where there's an autonomous force. Set them up according to the 1 through 6, and the resources they generate are in the back, and they don't change. And there's 7 fleets, and so you distribute them among forces, the Stargates. So that's interesting. And then resources. This is where you do development, etc. First of all, he's here, and 206 has 1 fleet, so they can move 231 up to a value. They can increase the value of that by 1. And you take away Starfleet, and you'll keep this here until it reaches its max. Okay, and then this one is turning that into a Stargate. So he has. You need 2 fleets to turn him into a Stargate. He's got 2, and then he'll turn that into a Stargate. You'll indicate that, and you'll take him off the board. That's that, and then developing fleets. So then we calculate how much. This is the number of system points. If one of the die rolls is that from fate you lose basically Stargates, and that didn't happen here. So basically the maintenance is when you have multiple fleets beyond 1 that aren't explorers, you deduct that. So there's 2, there's 1 extra, so it's 1, 2, so there's 2 maintenance. Total resources you have are 18 plus what was previous, so it's 33. And then I'm going to build some fleets. 209 and 205 a lot of explorers. So that takes 10. They expended 10 points, and that gets me down to 23 remaining. So that's how that works. It's a completion of turn for me, but now the autonomous forces, first of all, these are hostile. So what'll happen is you take the number of these according to the Stargate, you place them there, and then the rest you're going to have going towards the nearest Stargate, which is 4 of these. And each of these forces only has 1 regular Starfleet. They don't have different groupings of them. So that's Civilization 1, and they have to go 3. So they roll 6. They roll on the scatter table. So they roll 6. And actually they're okay. It looks like there's going to be combat there. You stay there, and we'll see if these are hostile or not. So we roll on the random interaction table. They're also hostile. And then next turn they'll be moving towards. And then also on here there's an interesting way of tracking the interactions. You keep track on the matrix. Since both these are hostile, you'll place markers saying their hostility. The autonomous forces have Stargates. They can develop ships themselves. So they have 3, 4. Each of these can develop a regular Starfleet with 1 remaining for next time. So that's a completed turn 17. So that's Outreach, the Conquest of the Galaxy 3000 AD from SPI. One of the earliest sci-fi games out there, and holds up really well. The components, there's a lot of good things about them. The flat tray over 30 years, you might have some problems with the plastic on the cover, but it's got a really nice tray. Actually, I like the counters. The map is outstanding. You almost got like a 3D effect because it shows clusters of stars within the different bands. It's very abstracted in that the movements happen over generations, so it has to abstract. But you get your different groupings of kind of forces you can put in your star fleets, and it extrapolates from the Star Force, which is their previous game as far as the look of the components and everything. You have enemy forces. Well, they can be allies or enemies, but forces that pop up. You have different resources to develop. You develop your fleets by developing systems. You have a goal of trying to increase your civilization levels by going to the galactic core. I'm a big fan, and I'd highly recommend it. I'll give it a 9.